The auction yard was loud with the hard rhythm of boots on wood, the sharp cries of livestock, and the steady chant of the auctioneer cutting through it all like a whip. Dust floated thick in the air, glowing gold in the early morning light that slipped through the high rafters. Horses stood packed in narrow pens, some strong and proud with lifted heads, others nervous, shifting their weight, eyes wide. Buyers moved from pen to pen with cold focus, hands running over backs and legs like they were judging tools, not lives. At the far end of the yard, near a leaning fence where weeds pushed through cracked boards, stood a colt no one stopped for. He couldn't have been more than a year old. His legs were too long for his thin body, ribs pressing against dull chestnut skin. His mane was uneven and dirty, his coat patchy and uncared for. He didn't call out. He didn't stomp or shy away. He just stood there, quiet and small, eyes too big for his face, watching the world pass him by. A faded tag hung from the pen. Number 143. Men walked past him without slowing. One glanced in and snorted, "That thing ain't worth $1. Another shook his head. "Looks like he's never had a full meal. Won't last long." Someone laughed, "Can't pull, can't ride. Waste of hay." And just like that, they moved on, past him, around him, as if he wasn't even there. On the other side of the yard, a dusty pickup rolled to a stop. A woman stepped down slowly. She wasn't tall, and she wasn't dressed to impress. Her boots were worn, her denim jacket faded and stained at the elbows. Her face carried years of sun and wind, lines cut deep from work and loss. Her name was Clara Sutton. She hadn't planned to come to the auction that morning. Truth was, she'd been avoiding places like this since her husband died 2 winters back. The ranch felt too quiet now, too empty. But she'd had a dream the night before, a strange one that wouldn't let her rest. In it, a small colt stood alone in a storm, shaking, waiting. He looked straight at her, not afraid, just tired. When she woke before dawn, her heart was pounding and the image wouldn't leave her. So she'd gotten dressed, hitched the truck, and driven into town without fully knowing why. Clara walked slowly along the rows of pens. She watched how horses held themselves, how their ears moved, how they breathed when she came close. She clicked her tongue softly now and then. Most didn't interest her. Strong horses, flashy horses, loud horses, none of them felt right. Then she reached the far end of the yard. The colt was half hidden behind bigger animals, but something about his stillness caught her eye. He didn't turn away when she stopped. He didn't lean in either. He just looked at her, eyes dark and deep, holding something heavy inside them. Clara stepped closer. She saw the scars then. Thin, rough lines under his belly, badly healed. Someone had pushed him too early, too hard. There was fear in him, but no fight left to show it. "What's your story?" she whispered. An auction worker passed behind her and laughed. "That one's useless. Some backyard breeder dumped him. Won't eat right. Been here days and barely touched his hay." Clara didn't answer. She lowered her hand slowly, palm open, and waited. The colt's nostrils flared. His ears tilted toward her voice. He didn't step back. "You see something in that sack of bones?" the worker asked. She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the colt. Something stirred in her chest. Not pity, not even hope. Just a quiet knowing that she was meant to be standing right there. The auction rolled on. Horses were led out, bids were shouted, deals made. Then it was time for number 143. The colt was brought into the ring, his steps uneven, legs trembling under his light frame. The crowd grew quiet in an uncomfortable way. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Lot 143. Young colt, not broke. Needs care, might be a project for the right home. No hands went up. The colt stood with his head low, chest rising fast. Someone chuckled. A man lifted his phone, smirking. "Do I hear 20? 10? 5? The auctioneer pressed. Silence. "I'll take him." The words cut clean through the noise. Heads turned. Clara stood near the rail, calm, steady. "You're sure, ma'am?" the auctioneer asked. "I know what he is," she said. "Run the sale." The gavel cracked. sold. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the colt was led back. Clara followed. The handler handed her the rope with a shrug. "He's yours." She took it gently. The colt didn't pull away, but he didn't follow either. Clara bent slightly so her eyes were level with his. "You're not number 143, she said softly. "Not anymore. I think your name's Toby." The colt blinked. Slowly, carefully, he took one step toward her. Just one. The yard went quiet behind them. Clara let him out. The dust rose around them as they walked, and for the first time in months, the hollow space inside her chest felt a little smaller. The drive home was quiet. Toby stood in the trailer without a sound. When they reached the ranch, the sun was low, casting long shadows over fences that still stood strong, even if the laughter was gone. Clara led him into a small round pen near the barn. Safe, quiet. She brought him water. He waited until she stepped back, then drank like he'd forgotten how. Over the next days, Clara didn't rush him. She spoke softly. She worked nearby so he could watch her. Sometimes she brought apples. At first, he ignored them. Then one day he ate from her hand. That night, as the wind moved through the fields, Toby lay down without pacing. Clara watched from the window, tears slipping down her face, surprised by how much this quiet, broken colt already meant to her. And she didn't yet know how deeply their lives were about to change. The mornings settled into a steady rhythm after that. Clara rose before the sun, the way she always had, pulling on her boots while the ranch still slept under pale gray light. She fed the horses, checked the fences, and worked the land the same as ever. But now there was a new presence watching her. Toby stood in the round pen near the barn, head lifted when he heard her steps, ears turning toward her voice when she spoke his name. She didn't rush him. Clara had learned long ago that broken things didn't mend under force. They needed time. They needed quiet. She talked to him while she worked, not asking for anything, just letting her voice exist near him. Simple words. "You're safe here." "You're doing fine. It's all right." At first, he only listened. Then, slowly, he began to answer in his own way. A step closer, a longer look, a softer breath. She noticed the changes in small details. He started finishing his hay. His ribs didn't stand out as sharp. His eyes didn't dart at every sound. The fear was still there, tucked deep, but it no longer ruled him. One morning, when Clara walked toward the pen, Toby moved to the gate before she reached it. She stopped, heart catching in her chest. "Well now," she whispered, "look at you." She stepped inside slowly, careful not to crowd him. He didn't back away. He stood there, legs steady, watching her. Clara lifted the halter. The leather creaked softly. Toby sniffed it, breath warm against her hand. For a moment, she thought he might panic. Instead, he lowered his head. Clara slid the halter into place and clipped it gently. "There we go," she said. There was no celebration, no victory cry, just a quiet moment between them that felt bigger than it looked. That day, she didn't lead him anywhere. She just let him stand with it on, feel its weight, understand it wasn't a threat. Trust, she knew, was built in inches, not miles. As the days passed, Clara began asking a little more. A turn, a pause. When Toby hesitated, she stopped. When he tried, she praised him. Her voice stayed calm, steady, the same tone she'd once used with her husband when the world weighed heavy on him. Toby learned her rhythm. He learned that her hands didn't hurt, that her voice meant safety. One evening, after a long day fixing a fence line, Clara carried a folding chair to the edge of the pen and sat down. The sun dipped low, painting the fields in warm orange light. Toby stood nearby, one hind leg resting, eyes half-lidded. "You remind me of someone," she said quietly. His ears flicked toward her. "My husband was quiet too. Took a long time to trust anything good." She smiled faintly. "But once he did, he gave his whole heart." Her voice trembled, but she kept going. Talking wasn't new pain anymore. It was release. Toby shifted closer. Just a step, but enough. That night he lay down early, resting easy. Clara watched him through the barn window and felt something loosen inside her that had been tight for years. The next morning, clouds rolled in low and heavy. Thunder echoed across the hills by afternoon. Storms made most horses restless, and Toby was no different. He paced the pen, head high, eyes wide. Clara stayed nearby, leaning on the fence. "It's just noise," she told him. "It'll pass." The rain came hard. Wind howled through the trees. When a sharp crack of thunder split the sky, Toby bolted. Clara's heart dropped. She ran toward the pasture, calling his name into the storm. "Toby." Rain soaked her clothes. Mud grabbed at her boots. She called again, fear tightening her chest. Then she heard it. Hooves splashing through wet ground. She turned just as lightning lit the field. Toby stood a few yards away, soaked, shaking, but facing her. "You came back," she breathed. She stepped toward him slowly. He lowered his head and pressed it against her chest, trembling. Clara wrapped her arms around his neck, rain and tears mixing together. "It's all right," she whispered. "I've got you." From that night on, something shifted. Toby didn't just tolerate her. He chose her. Training moved forward in careful steps. A brush along his back, a blanket, the feel of a saddle pad. Each new thing brought tension, but not panic. He trusted her enough to try. Weeks passed. Toby filled out. His coat shone in the sun. His steps grew surer. When Clara finally placed a light training saddle on him, he stood still. When she leaned over his back for the first time, he didn't flinch. They didn't ride that day. They just stood together, breathing, learning each other's balance. Neighbors noticed. Some shook their heads. "That colt was a lost cause," one said. "Don't get too attached." Clara didn't argue. She didn't need to. She saw the truth every morning when Toby met her at the gate. One crisp fall morning, a letter arrived. Clara read it twice, hands shaking. An old friend had put her name forward for a small exhibition. They wanted a rescue horse, a story of change. Clara looked out at the pasture. Toby stood near the fence, ears forward, watching her. "Looks like we've been invited," she said softly. He lifted his head and let out a quiet nicker. Clara smiled, a real smile, full and warm. They weren't finished yet, but they were ready for the next step, and neither of them was alone anymore. The morning of the exhibition arrived, wrapped in pale mist that clung to the fields and fences like a held breath. Clara moved quietly around the barn, checking straps, brushing dust from tack that hadn't been used in years. Her hands worked from habit, but her thoughts stayed on Toby. He stood in the trailer, calm but alert, ears turning at every sound. When she rested her hand on his neck, he leaned into it just enough to let her know he felt steady. "You're ready," she told him. "So am I."